Greetings, guitar engineers. I'm Desi Cerna, and in this free guitar lesson, I'm going to talk about pinky problems. If you have a weak pinky, if you have trouble using your pinky on the guitar, if you're interested in exercises to help strengthen your pinky and improve its dexterity, I've got some recommendations for you. Now, what I'm mainly going to talk about is how I have overcome my own issues with my pinky finger. And the idea here is that you'll see how I explore options and play to my strengths, and hopefully this will give you ideas of how you can do the same thing. So you don't need to copy any of my specific fingerings, but you just want to follow a similar process to explore what works best for your hand. All right, let's dive in, and let's first talk about how you would typically finger scale patterns when you initially learn scale patterns. I'll start with the minor pentatonic in A minor. So when you get introduced to the 5 pentatonic patterns, it may be suggested to you that you follow specific fingerings. For example, playing with one finger per fret. So in this case, since the notes span 4 frets here, I would just assign one finger per fret and move across the fretboard and keep the fingers in those frets like I just did. And then as you move to the next position, you try to keep one finger per fret. Sometimes it doesn't quite work out that way, like here in pattern 3. I got to reach back, but from there on out, I can kind of keep everything in position there. All right, well, that's a great way to finger the patterns when you initially learn them. You get all your fingers involved. It helps you kind of loosen up your whole hand. And I also think it kind of keeps the patterns organized, and it makes it easier to learn them and keep track of them. But when you actually start to use the patterns to play music, it's a different story. So for example, if I go back to this A minor pentatonic pattern 2, it makes sense to use this fingering as I move across the fretboard here and play the whole pattern. But as I'm kind of riffing and jamming in the scale, notice that now I'm favoring my first 3 fingers. I'm not using fingers 2 and 4 like I was when I initially played through the pattern. So when I really get to using these patterns and I'm sliding and I'm bending and I'm hammering off hammering on and pulling off, I'm usually far more comfortable using my first 3 fingers. Most guitar players are. You will frequently see players do this sort of thing, and that pinky finger is tucked. Because these first 3 fingers, for me and for most guitar players, are stronger and more coordinated, and they get the job done, and I often just don't even need to have that 4th finger in there, particularly when I'm jamming in pentatonic patterns like this. And this is why, if you are studying in one of my courses and learning scale patterns, I tell you that you should familiarize yourself with the patterns and how they work on the fretboard. But then, as soon as you are able, you want to move on to the next step, which is learn how to play melodies, riffs, and solos that use the patterns so you can see how they actually get used in music. And one of the things you'll discover when you use them in music is that you don't always play straight up and down patterns vertically. You often move horizontally between patterns, and you have articulations like slides and bends and hammer-ons in there. And so the fingerings that you use when you just play straight up and down a pattern plainly is not going to work when you're using the scale pattern musically with those articulations and moving horizontally and stuff. So you really get to learn the best way to finger the patterns when you actually begin to use them musically. So you don't really want to dwell too much on how you finger the patterns as you are initially learning them. And you certainly don't want to get stuck thinking that you have to strictly follow a 1 finger per fret rule. That does not always work when you're actually playing music. So you saw me do that as I was jamming in the pentatonic a moment ago. I'll give you a song example. Think about Breakdown by Tom Petty. uses the A minor pentatonic scale. It's a great example of how players would typically move through a pentatonic pattern. And notice that I'm going to favor my first 3 fingers. I'm not going to stick with this 1 finger per fret idea. I would never do that. I'm going to go. Notice as I come down here to pattern 1, instead of following a 1 finger per fret rule, I use my 3rd finger there. Notice I even used my middle finger here in the 7th fret. That's how guitar players typically play. I have found that to be more comfortable and more effective as well. So again, don't get stuck in this idea of using 1 finger per fret. And you don't want to get stuck on this idea that you have to use your pinky. You're not breaking any rules if you leave the pinky out and play something without it. If you're more comfortable doing that, and if you're able to play something better, then it's the right fingering. So you just don't get stuck on this idea that if you're not using the pinky, that somehow you're not doing things right. When we listen to great music, if you're listening to a solo by David Gilmour or Stevie Ray Vaughan or John Mayer or whoever, you never stop and think, gosh, that sounded really good, but did he use his pinky there? Or did he reach up with his ring finger instead? Because if he reached up with his ring finger, then that's wrong and this music is wrong. You would never think that way. We don't think about that when we're listening to music from other people. Don't think about that as you are evaluating your own playing. You want to work towards something being comfortable and you playing something so that it sounds good. If it sounds good, then it's correct. Now, if you like to use your pinky, if you choose to use it because it seems more comfortable and more effective, so be it. So if you're playing breakdown and you actually like to use your pinky there because that enables you to play it better, first of all, I highly doubt that would be true. But if it were true, then you certainly could do that. So I'm not telling you that you must use your pinky, and I'm not telling you that you cannot use your pinky. I'm just telling you that you have to, you need to think about what's the best way for you to accomplish something. And for most guitar players, that often means sticking to those first 3 fingers. And I'll go on to give you some more examples. So as I come down the scale here, oftentimes, instead of coming down here to the minor 3rd, in this case C, I'm going to go back here and play it there because, well, I can skip my pinky finger. So if I'm doing something like that, I might rather go, if I'm doing something like, well, I could play it like this instead. That's more comfortable for me in many cases, and I play things better that way. And I can avoid using my pinky, which is, my weakest, least coordinated finger, and not because it's been neglected, but because it just naturally is on most people's hands. And so it's just often not necessary to use it, and there are workarounds that just help you play more comfortably and play better. Now, sometimes you'll see people prescribe certain exercises that force you to use your pinky, and the idea is let's improve its strength and dexterity so that it's no longer a weakness and you don't have to avoid it. So they might have you take a pentatonic pattern like this and practice doing exercises like, and so on. Well, I'm not usually a big fan of those, and the reason why is because I find that it's often not necessary that my pinky be stronger or more coordinated because I'm perfectly comfortable doing those types of licks with my first 3 fingers fact, I can do it much better. So, and if I need to use my pinky now and then, I actually have enough strength and coordination to do it. I much prefer to use my ring finger if I can. But in other words, the pinky isn't really holding me back. It being a little weaker and less coordinated than the other fingers doesn't hold me back because I don't need to use it. So I don't want to spend time trying to improve it if it's not necessary. Also, the reason why I'm kind of against this idea of focusing on strengthening the pinky finger is because I actually spent quite a bit of time on this years ago, and I discovered that my pinky finger's strength and dexterity did not improve despite me trying to put a bunch of effort into doing that. And so ultimately I decided that I'm putting all this time and effort into trying to improve this perceived weakness, but it's really not necessary because I can still play anything I want and work around it. And even when I did put the effort into it, I didn't really see any improvement anyway. It was still the weakest, least coordinated finger. And there's, anatomical reasons for that because of the way I think it shares a muscle or a tendon with your ring finger. It's often difficult to get independence between your pinky and your ring finger, using them at the same time independently. That's a big struggle for me. Some guitar players are more comfortable with this than others. So let's talk about some different situations where some players might prefer to use the pinky and some may not want to use the pinky. So let's take Johnny B. Goode, for example. It's got some different runs in there that does stuff like, whoops. So I'm kind of in a pentatonic box here, but and sometimes you might do something like, Okay, so I was purposely using my pinky there just to kind of make it easy for you to see where I'm playing. By the way, that's I do that in my instructional videos a lot, where if I'm trying to show somebody slowly where to place their fingers, I'd rather do this than this, because I think for you, the viewer, it's easier to see where I'm placing my fingers if I spread them out like that, even though that's not how I would normally play it. I wasn't teaching something. But anyway, I did that there just a second ago. So as you're playing these sort of note groups, are you someone that prefers to use the pinky, or are you someone that would prefer to use three fingers? I'm usually would prefer to use three fingers and go, whoops. Or, right? So you could try stuff like that. Maybe just take this lick here. Or maybe just this lick. Let's just take the first string. Right? That is much easier, and I'm much more comfortable doing that than I am using these fingers here. In fact, that's about as good as I can do it with those fingers, but I don't like I do it better and faster. I can do it longer, and my fingers don't fatigue that way. So, and this has always been the case. Even back when I was focusing on trying to strengthen my pinky finger, I discovered that no matter how much work I put into it, my first three fingers were still better, always better. And so I thought, well, then why not just use them? Why do I need to do it differently? So sometimes players, though, find that they are more comfortable using the pinky. I would say if you're gonna do a lick like this. In most cases, most guitar players are going to find that the first three fingers work best for that. But every once in a while, I've had a student that said, I'm actually more comfortable using the pinky. There, I'm working at that. That's kind of hard for me. And so if that's the case for you, go ahead and do it. As we play through these note combinations here, the song I Know a Little by Lynyrd Skynyrd comes to mind. In the intro, it's got some fast lead licks that are played in this key here and use some of these note combinations. Here's one example of a lick from the song. It does something like this. I'll slow that down so it's... Well, here, let me do it with the fourth finger so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing. Okay, that's very uncomfortable for me. I'd much rather use three fingers. In fact, at the end there, instead of going, I like to go slide, pull off. I like to do the bend with my ring finger too. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, so there's some different fingering options there. I am kind of a three-finger guy. I'm going to prefer to do this if I can. Of course, I have larger hands, so it's not too much trouble for me to reach up with these fingers like this. Maybe you have smaller hands and that's not going to work out, so you just can't get your ring finger up there. I'm not sure. Maybe you don't play this song in this key. Maybe you play it up in the key of D instead. You know, maybe if you have smaller hands, you save those types of licks for keys that you can play a little bit higher on the fretboard, where the frets are closer together. In the same way that I would probably be uncomfortable playing this lick down here in F because of the fret spacing. It's just throwing me off. That's harder for me, even though I've got big hands. That's quite a awkward stretch there. Right? So I probably wouldn't want to play that type of lick down there. I'm okay with it at the 5th fret though. The bend, I do not bend with my pinky ever. I've never been comfortable with that. It always seems awkward. I just don't have enough strength. I don't know if strength is the right word. I don't have enough control. My issue with my pinky is that I don't have the same amount of feeling in it that I have in the other fingers. And no amount of practicing, no amount of exercises was able to give me more feeling in that finger. And eventually I realized it doesn't matter. My fingers are fine. I can play everything fine. I just avoid the pinky sometimes. And so when I bend, I prefer to bend with my ring finger. Most people do, but every now and then I see guitar players are like, I'm actually more comfortable bending with the pinky. If you're more comfortable with that and you feel like that gives you the control over the string and the bend that you need, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So let's take a lick like the beginning of the solo to Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd. So something like that, right? D minor pentatonic. So are you more comfortable with your pinky or with your ring finger? Notice that I use my middle finger here too when I'm using my ring finger there. Right? If you want to make an exercise to help you play licks like this, instead of going to some exercise book to see what you might do, what type of finger, acrobatics you might do in order to, improve your dexterity, just take the lick itself and turn it into an exercise. So if you're having trouble going, then you're not going to improve by going to play something else. Take that and turn it into an exercise and repeat it over and over. Maybe you take just part of it. All right, let's go back to A minor here. I want to play a little bit of the solo from Stairway to Heaven. So it kind of starts like that. If you stick with a 1 finger per fret rule, that's how you would finger that. Ends on F there, adds an F to the A minor pentatonic scale. So that's one way you could do it. If you don't like using your pinky, you could leave it out of there and do it without the pinky. Doesn't Nothing wrong with doing that. That could work just as well. Notice that I like to get my middle finger involved here. I'm okay with that. Whoops. Or I might, maybe I don't mind using the pinky here, but I don't like it there, you know? I don't really have trouble using the pinky here in this lick because I'm not using it together with the ring finger, so I don't have any issue with trying to use those independently at the same time, which is a problem for me. I'm not needing to bend or anything with the pinky, so it doesn't bother me going... It's not so hard for me to end with the pinky either, but that's probably more comfortable. Another option is I don't have to come back to F here. I've got an F back here. So I could go, or maybe I'll leave the pinky out of this altogether. Look at that. I avoided having to reach up here and use my pinky there. And I kind of like the legato slide at the end there. It's kind of nice. So here, I'm definitely going to use my ring finger to bend. I don't want to use my pinky. I don't want to use my pinky, but if you're more comfortable with the pinky and you have more control, then use the pinky. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, well, you shouldn't bend with your ring finger there. That should be the pinky finger. Why? I am totally comfortable using my ring finger and it sounds good. Why does it matter? Well, why should I use the pinky? You know, well, because you're holding yourself back, because you're not. It doesn't hold me back. In fact, I'll be talking more about this throughout this video, but I discovered that getting these preconceived notions out of what fingers I should and shouldn't use out of my head and just going with what works best for my hands actually helped me become a better guitar player. I was actually holding myself back by not allowing myself to do things that worked better. Think about that. So if I continue here, I come up here to the, now I'm in pentatonic pattern 2, got an F added to that pattern, and notice I'm using these fingers. I'm not going, remember how I initially fingered pattern 2? Not a bad way to learn how to finger the pattern when you learn the pattern. Gets all your fingers involved, kind of a good warm-up for the hands, but when it comes down to actual playing, I'm not going to use this fingering. I never use that fingering for pattern 2. If I did, I would be a lousy player because I'm so much better with using these fingers. I'm going to talk about using major scale patterns. I'm going to talk about doing some chord work that would use the pinky and how you could either strengthen the pinky or work around it. But first, let me just give you a couple more examples here using pentatonic patterns. I want to talk about the song Give Me 3 Steps by Lynyrd Skynyrd. It's got this lick in it that sounds like this. So on. So this is D major pentatonic. Here's D. So I'm holding the second string there and then bend on the third string. It's one of those country bends. Playing some country double stop stuff here. And this is an awkward lick for me because I got to keep my pinky on the second string stationary, but then I got to move the other fingers and even bend. So this is something that I'm more comfortable doing this sort of bend if I don't use the ring finger, if I get the ring finger out of there and use the middle finger instead. And in fact, you'll see guitar players do that a lot. And the reason why is because it's these two fingers here, I have trouble using them independently at the same time. Again, it's because they share like a tendon or a muscle or something, so I just don't have complete independent control over them when I'm using them both together. So if I can get the ring finger out of the equation and use my hand like this is okay. I can use the pinky together with the middle finger. That doesn't bother me. So you see Stevie Ray Vaughan do this sort of thing a lot if he's like in a minor key. He found that more comfortable, and I usually find that more comfortable too. So I would do that like that. However, at one point I thought, well, let's see if I can improve this and get a little bit more comfortable with this. And I was able to actually make some improvement with it, and I'm okay using this fingering now. Since my pinky is going to remain stationary there, it wasn't so hard for me to train myself to do that. Now, if the pinky had to move or bend or do something else, it would certainly be more complicated. But here's a case where I was able to spend some time to see if I could get comfortable with a fingering that was uncomfortable, and I was able to get comfortable with it. So you work with things, you explore your options, you see what comes together, and if it comes together, you go with it. And if it doesn't, you figure out, okay, well, what's another option? What else can I do? You could play it like this. In fact, I still might do it like that sometimes. All right, let's move on to major scale patterns. Let me play in the key of G here. So, like with the pentatonic patterns, when you learn major scale patterns, you can kind of go position to position, and you can get all your fingers involved. And kind of one of the rules is if notes are spread across 4 frets with this grouping, you use fingers 1, 2, and 4. Or if they're spread across 4 frets with this grouping, you use fingers 1, 3, and 4. Sometimes you'll have patterns like 3-note per string patterns. You'll either have a grouping like this or a grouping like this. 1, 2. This is 1, 3, 4. Or like this, 1, 2, 4. Or you got notes that are all a whole step apart, in which case I like to use 1, 2, 4. Some players will go 1, 3, 4, which is really difficult for me. I have a hard time spreading these fingers, even though I am spreading them. It's uncomfortable and it's difficult. Look at how far down I got to bring this hand here. So that doesn't work well for me. And if you ever are playing patterns with this sort of note spacing, you can figure out which finger is best to use in the middle by putting your index finger on the first note, put your pinky on the last note, and then take a look at which finger naturally falls, in this case, over the 5th fret. Look at that. My middle finger just naturally falls right over it. And that's why it makes more sense to do that. To get my ring finger back there is awkward. But maybe you're someone that when you do this same sort of test here, it's actually your ring finger that's closer to the 5th fret. In that case, you might want to use 1, 3, 4 fingering. I remember watching an instructional video years ago, and the person in the video said, when you play your this pattern, you should use finger 1, 3, and 4. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, that's so awkward and uncomfortable for me. And why would that person tell me that I should use it? Because in their case, with their hand, that's what naturally fell there. And so they assumed that that was the correct fingering. They didn't really think about the idea that maybe somebody else's hand didn't work that way. So my hand doesn't work that way. So I always use 1, 2, 4 on those big stretches. And as you go through and play major scale patterns, regardless of whether you're playing the set of 5 or set of 7, 3 notes per string, you're always going to come across note groups like this, you know, again. And when you initially learn the major scale patterns, yeah, it's not a bad idea to use the those fingerings because it gets all your fingers involved. It's a good way to kind of warm up the hand. But like with the pentatonic, when I actually start using major scale patterns to riff and jam and play stuff, then it's a totally different ball game. And I go with, because now I'm going to be sliding and bending and other things. I'm going to be moving, you know, vertically up patterns, but horizontally as well. So I will often favor 3 fingers, you know. So I had some pinky in there at times, but I had a lot of 3-finger stuff there. I'm kind of just noodling here, but that's what I do a lot. I'm going to favor those 3 fingers, especially if I'm bending. So I might play this major scale pattern like this. That might make sense if I'm just playing up the pattern. But if I'm going to be bending, I'm not going to bend with my pinky. I'm not going to. Yeah, that's just not going to work for me, okay? If that naturally feels better to you and you can play better that way and you sound better, then go with it. But if you're like me or most players, you're going to want to favor 3 fingers a lot and you're going to want to remove the pinky from the fingering a lot. I do like the pinky when I get down there. All right, so often you can avoid using the pinky when you're playing passages like this, but sometimes you can't. So if I play a little bit of Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne here. So I'm in F sharp minor, or relative to A major if you want to think of it that way. So when I play that riff, I finger it that way. I think that works best because of the fret note spacing. I'm not comfortable using these fingers. I can do it, but okay, here's a case where I can do it, but this is actually more uncomfortable and feels more awkward than just using my pinky. So I go ahead and use the pinky there. And it's not like my pinky is worthless. I have less strength and coordination in my pinky than the other fingers, but I have enough strength and coordination to use it when I need it. At those times when it doesn't get the job done, it's usually never a problem because the other fingers can do the job easily. But in this case, I would use the pinky. So if you're struggling to play something like this, you know, what do? How can you strengthen that pinky? I mean, I'm trying to think. Well, you know, we've got the A here, so that note could be the 5th string open instead. So I could go, instead of, I can go and get the pinky out of that portion of the riff. I could play, that's D there, so I could play the open D. Boy, that's kind of, the picking of that messes me up. having to hop over the strings, but I guess that's an option. Maybe for someone that actually works and they're comfortable with that. But let's say that you wanted to strengthen your pinky because for this purpose, you really felt like using the pinky there is the best thing, and you felt like if you could just, improve the strength of your pinky a little bit, then you could pull that off without any problems. So what do? Well, you could go out and get yourself one of these hand exercisers, right? You've probably seen these, and you put your fingers on it, then you squeeze it to exercise your fingers, right? With that pinky, maybe do a little extra work with that pinky there, trying to get it stronger. I'm not a fan of these. I think that they may have some use if you have some sort of hand issues, or you need to just work on your grip strength, or you're overcoming an injury. I don't know. But generally speaking, I don't think that these things are going to help improve your guitar technique. And the reason why is I'm talking about the strength of your pinky finger, but really when you're playing guitar, it's not actually the strength of the finger that is the issue. It's really the agility and the dexterity and the coordination of that finger. This requires muscle, kind of like those hand grip things where you close the grips to build your forearm muscle. This is too similar to that. And that's not the type of strength that you need on guitar, or rather I should say that strength is not needed on guitar. When you're playing something like this, or when you're playing anything on the guitar for that matter, even when you're doing like a bend too, you're not using strength so much as you are using finesse. And so guitar playing really requires you to have the right touch on the strings. And having the right touch means having control over a finger and having dexterity and coordination, not strength. So it's not like you need bigger, bulkier muscles in that pinky finger. Rather, it's more that you kind of need to open up some neural pathways in order to have a little bit more feeling in that finger and to have more dexterity. So I don't think that a strength training exercise like this is what you need. Instead, you need to get your hands on the fretboard and practice that movement over and over. Likewise, you might see some exercises where you do kind of these, you kind of play twister with your fingers, and you do stuff like... or, I'm not a fan of those types of exercises either, because those aren't the type of finger movements that you use when you're playing real music. And I don't want to spend time improving a finger movement that I wouldn't even use when I'm playing music. If I'm trying to improve how well I play something like this, then the best thing to do is to play that over and over. Figure out how you're most comfortable positioning your hand. Maybe you need to move your guitar to the other leg. Maybe you need to play with a strap. Maybe you need to raise it or lower it. Figure out, where do you need to have your wrist? How can you be most comfortable? How can you position your hand so you're most comfortable and you can play this? Then you just need to play this over and over and just get used to training your fingers to get used to that specific movement. You want to make a little exercise out of it, mix it up, that would be a good idea. You could transpose it. Well, that's E. I could play it down there, so. Ooh, that gets a little trickier for the pinky there. how to move it with that pinky and ring finger right there. That's tricky for me. I don't like using those together independently. But but if I wanted to improve that, this would be a good little exercise. In fact, I used to do exercises like this. This is F sharp. I could come up here and do the same thing. So this would be an appropriate exercise because you're specifically doing the same movement that you need to do to play this riff, which is an actual riff from an actual song. So if your goal is to learn how to play this riff in Crazy Train, that's the type of exercise you want to do. You wouldn't want to go do some other type of exercise which is going to train you to do a different type of movement. You don't want to do something that's going to train you to try to improve strength, a type of strength that you don't actually need for this. This is more about finesse. Everything that you do on guitar is really more about finesse than it is anything else. I say strength. There's some amount of strength involved, I guess, you know, when you're bending and everything, but really more than anything, it's about agility and dexterity and finesse. It's about opening those neural pathways and getting used to those movements. You don't really need to be you don't need much strength for that. It's a very delicate touch. It's all about finesse. All right, well, I've talked a lot about scales and lead lines and stuff, but what about using your pinky and chords? You may have some issues with that. So let me walk you through a couple of examples and see if I can give you some good advice. So let's take Stairway to Heaven. You've got that section in the song that goes like this. I remember when I first learned this, I could not get that pull off with my pinky. I had a couple problems. First of all, I was learning this song way too early. I didn't have a lot of playing experience, and I was trying to play Stairway to Heaven, which is not easy. It took me a while for my playing skills to get caught up until I could actually make progress with this song. But I had a problem with doing the pull off with the pinky on that D chord, and I had a problem with getting my fingers in position coming from the G chord, and I had a problem with the G chord as well, like this. So what do I want to tell you about this? Well, let's start with that pull off. So here's a regular D chord, and I'm adding the pinky. That makes a suspension chord. So if you feel like your pinky is too weak or not coordinated enough to do that, and you're wondering what can I do to increase its strength or dexterity, what you do is this over and over again. Turn it into a little exercise. You know, move it around or something. So turn the specific part that you are trying to improve into its own exercise. That way you are specifically using the technique and the finger movements that you need to improve. That's the neural pathway that you need to open up. Don't do something like this. That's different movement. That's opening up different neural pathways. You don't want to do that. You want this. All right, what about coming from that G? How do you get things into position? Well, if you're fingering your G like that, your pinky's already on the note that you need to play, so hold it there if you can. I remember I realized that I was lifting all my fingers, building that D, then trying to quickly get my pinky back there, and I was late, and so I had to train myself to keep the pinky down. So So maybe that's something you need to do too. Train yourself to keep that pinky there as you change from G to D. Maybe this G is new to you. Maybe you're not even comfortable playing this G because you can't get your pinky in place there. Maybe you learned your G like this, and so this is new to you. You know, there's a couple different ways to play G. You can play it like this. You could hold both strings 1 and 2 up top here, or you could do it like that. Most guitar players will make use of all these fingerings. It kind of depends on what you're using the G together with. So when I play Stairway, it makes sense to use this fingering because it sets me up for that, as opposed to doing something like this. Whoops. Yeah, I don't like that. Maybe that works for you. It didn't work for me, so I realized I need to train myself to do my G like that. And if you've never done your G like that, well then you might want to just practice that fingering. And maybe playing a song like Love Me Do by the Beatles, which goes back and forth between G and C, and you actually hold the G note with your pinky on top. So that song could be a good exercise to get used to that G fingering. Maybe you put a lot of work into this part in Stairway and you just still can't get it to come out because your pinky's too weak, and despite your best efforts, you're just not seeing improvement. You know, you could play this without the pinky. You could do the G like this, and then when you go to the D chord, you could do it like this. See how I'm doing that D there? Instead of this, same notes, like that. Then my ring finger there. Pull off with the ring finger. So G like this. Is that wrong? Absolutely not. If it sounds good, it's right. If you're more comfortable doing that, there's no reason why you can't do that. I see guitar players do that sort of thing. It's not uncommon, you know, to see guitar players use a fingering that's a little out of the ordinary, but it works for them and it sounds good. Now, maybe you're already doing it this way, but you feel like you're always avoiding your pinky and that could maybe hold you back at some point. All right, well then try it the other way that I showed you and see if you can't make some progress with it over time. Maybe you can, but if you can't, it's not a big deal. You could get away with playing this without the pinky. I've got more examples for you. How about an E7? There's an open E major. Your pinky grabs the D at the 3rd fret on the 2nd string. There's E7 chord. I have never liked this chord shape for as long as I've been playing. It's difficult for me to get my pinky there, and it just feels so strange and so uncomfortable. Particularly when I'm trying to use this chord together with other things, like for example playing the song Mary Had a Little Lamb as recorded by Stevie Ray Vaughan. You can see I'm having trouble getting to that chord shape. Well, then I watched a video and I saw that Stevie Ray Vaughan actually played it like this. So here's that E7. He omitted the 5th string and just muted it. And then instead of having his ring finger on E on the 4th string, he put his middle finger on there. Oh, well, that takes the ring finger out of it. And that's, you know, I got issue with these fingers here. So if I take the ring finger out of it, then all of a sudden the pinky is okay. So, and then the 5th string is muted. Okay, well, I'm good with that. stop right there. There's a B7. A lot of beginner players have trouble getting all their fingers in place on that B7, and particularly the pinky. You know, if you're a beginner player and you're inexperienced, it's hard to get that pinky there. But check out what happens here in this song. The pinky doesn't get used initially. That's when I need the pinky, and that's when I put it down. So, coming from E7. So I kind of put it down late. And I do that all the time when I'm playing songs with B7. So instead of trying to get to all of it at once, I can just go hit that root first, maybe this portion of the chord. If I'm doing something like... See how I first played the B? That gave me a little split second to get everything else into place. Or maybe I can get these 3 fingers down and I'll give myself a split second to get that pinky down. Guitar players do that sort of stuff all the time. So sometimes you might have trouble with that pinky finger, or any other finger for that matter, because you're expecting yourself to do something that isn't necessary. You may not need to get all those fingers down on a chord like B7 immediately. Get your first 3 fingers down and then take an extra split second to get that pinky down. Just stay away from the first string when you're strumming initially. Once the pinky is down, then you can play it. That's not cheating. That's what a lot of guitar players do, including myself. Let's move on. A few more examples. What about Every Breath You Take by the Police? Big stretches here. Lots of pinky. This doesn't bother me because I'm not using the ring finger. I'm okay. I have more control over my pinky when the ring finger is not also in use. It's using those two together independently at the same time that's difficult. So this is a big stretch, but it's not terrible for me. Maybe you're having issues with something like this. Maybe you can't do the stretches. So what do? You explore your options and you see if you can play it some other way. These same notes, A, E, B, and C sharp, can be played like this. Open A, E, B, C sharp. Look at that. I don't even need to use the pinky or stretch. So I can go. Okay, this. No way around that. Maybe I simplify it. Maybe I just do these notes. Okay, that's not exactly how it goes. But it's similar. And so if you can't do that, and if you do this, it's probably going to be close enough. How about instead of that, I just go, there's the same note. So I have almost all the same notes. It doesn't sound exactly the same, but it sounds close enough. If you had to do this song in a band or something and you were unable to do the big stretches, you could play it this way and you would probably be the only one that would know that you had made some changes. How about this song? Maybe. What I Like About You by the Romantics. That first chord is an E sus. So it's an E, then you put your pinky in the second string for the sus. Then it goes to A, D, or you can play it down here. And some people have difficulty getting that bar chord and getting that pinky in place so quickly. I have become comfortable with this because not only did I practice it to try to improve it, but this is also a really popular cover band song, and I played this song 1,000 times over the years, and so I had an opportunity to get better with it. And you might be able to practice it and get more comfortable with it, but here's a little secret. I didn't always play it that way because it wasn't always necessary to play it that way. I could leave the E out and just do this, in which case I could use different fingers. So if you came out to see my band play and you requested What I Like About You and we started the song and I went, would you even realize that I had left out the E there? Probably not. Okay, it sounds almost the same, and if you can avoid the pinky altogether, and with a little careful finger placement so that you mute some of the other strings, you can get that E sus sound like that. Then go to your A. Actually, you could go to A like that too. You could go. That's a cool sound. Or I'm going to talk about one more song before we wrap this up. How about Under the Bridge by the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Okay, so if you ever tried to play this, it is not that easy. It uses a full C-form bar chord here. And as if that wasn't hard enough, there's some slides. And there's also a hammer-on pull-off on the second string. So you got to take it off the root, come over to the second string, hammer-on pull-off, and bring it back. Whoops. This is something that I actually practiced quite a bit, and I played in bands, and I got comfortable. I got comfortable enough doing this that I could do it and I could get it right 9 times out of 10. But it still feels awkward, and I still don't always get that hammer-on pull-off. Sometimes I miss it. And I'm always a little nervous when I play this because I'm never quite sure if I'm going to get that part or not. I just don't quite have full feeling in my pinky, and so I never have complete confidence because I can't always tell if it's going to the right spot. So this is a tricky part to play, but it might surprise you to know that this song was actually originally recorded using a capo. If I put a capo on the second fret here, I can play that whole intro without ever using my pinky. That's how the song was actually recorded. Now, when you watch the Red Hot Chili Peppers play it live, guitarist John Frusciante, I believe that he would actually play this without the capo in live versions, and that's how I saw him play it, like in the music video too. And so that's how I originally tried to learn it. It wasn't until sometime after that I realized that wasn't how it was recorded. When I played this in bands, I decided to do it without the capo. That way I could immediately transition to the next part, which is a key change, and go on and play the rest of the song without the capo on the guitar. But honestly, you could get away with keeping the capo on for portion of the song. You can play the intro. Up here and play the section in E. It doesn't really get in the way until the end here. I think it's played E major 7 with the low E string. Well, if you had the capo on there, just skip the low E and just go. And lucky for you, you sustain that for a couple of measures, which means you have an opportunity to take the capo off and keep going. And then the capo is removed, and when you get to the other sections of the song, it's no longer there. So there's a suggestion if you had to perform a song like this. Start with the capo on, and then when you get to that E major 7, when you get to that E major 7, take it off at that point as you're sustaining that chord and keep going. All right, well now you know that you don't need to let your pinky get in the way if it's causing you problems. Many guitar players will favor their first 3 fingers, and you can too if it helps you play better. If there are certain passages that require you to use the pinky finger, then you can strengthen the pinky finger by turning those passages into exercises and playing them over and over. But personally, I avoid any type of exercise that doesn't use real-life finger motions that I would use in actual songs. And I would suggest that you avoid those types of exercises too. And I wouldn't be concerned about trying to build finger strength. Playing guitar well is all about finesse, so focus on opening up those neural pathways. When you play well, you're not going to be putting a lot of muscle into it. You should actually have a fairly light touch. If you found this video helpful, click like and leave me some positive feedback. If you have any comments or questions, post them below and I'll reply. If you'd like to know what you should specifically be working on right now in order to improve your guitar playing and make better music, go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com. Answer the questions I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction calibrated to your current level. I'll show you what you specifically need to do in order to improve your playing skills and make better music. Enroll in your free course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the video description. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Desi Cerna. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the notification bell to receive alerts when new videos are uploaded. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.